Hey, Jory, how hard would it be to move the start time of this meeting to 5 after the hour in the future?
Not hard at all. So you would like for this to start at, so it's 11 my time, so 11:05. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying? Yeah,
I was thinking that because like no one ever shows up on, because I mean we all have meetings usually that run a minute or two over.
I
Would
think that's fine. Yeah, give folks like a little 5-minute breather because
right.
I'm just following Jeff and Eric from the last meeting over here. So, and Patricia and let's see. Yeah, so that's no problem. We can do a little 5-minute breather.
Awesome.
We may want to let everybody know that's not a calendar mistake in case they're like, oh, okay.
Oh, you mean in the new one?
Yeah, just because I've just updated it and some people do kind of offset their calendars for like, oh, I only start my meetings at like 15 after the hour. And so when they see that it's 11:05 to, noon, they may be like,
I'll send some emails and Slack messages and stuff later.
no problem.
All right, we can probably get cracking on this. Let me find the agenda. We have a pretty tame agenda, and David's not here. David Wheeler isn't here, which is fine. I put the agenda in the docs. It's pretty light today, which I don't think is a bad thing necessarily. Let me. So, thank you everyone for coming. We'll start out. We've got a doc from David Wheeler. If everyone hasn't taken a look at it, it's actually kind of cool. David he's part of the OpenSSF, but he also works on a tool called Flaw Finder, and he wants to create like a standard for all like static analyzers to use to know to ignore things. There's a couple comments from Daniel, who isn't here either, in the doc. It's cool. Give it a look. It's definitely worth reading. I'm not going to talk about it without David here. It's his thing. I don't think there's a lot for us to do about it. I think if he wants to do it, he does it, which is cool. All right, everyone sign in also. Thank you.
David is here. You've said his
David is
name.
here.
You've said his name 3 times, so he's erect.
Excellent, excellent. Just like Beetlejuice.
That's right.
And probably the same level of desirability.
I was going to say the opposite of that, but we'll just let you go. No, so we got a pretty light agenda, David. And the first thing on it was your false positive suppression document.
Ah, yes.
Which I read it. It looks cool. I don't know what the next steps are. I don't.
Okay, so I think technically we haven't agreed on whether or not this is a project this working group actually wants to work on. Did we agree on that? I don't think we agreed on that. So that's, I think, step one is let's see here. Last week I said I started working on a draft, but I don't think we actually agreed on that was work. We do this. It was just a hey idea. Why don't we create a draft to start working on this? So I think procedurally, I think what we need to do is, people have had time to look. Is this something that we as a group want to create as a little project? And if so, I think basically, if there's general agreement here, send an email to the TAC saying, hey, we plan to start this up as a new little project. Let us know if there's an issue. Usually, I would not expect there to be one, but I think the TAC wants to start getting notified of projects instead of being surprised, which seems like a reasonable desire. The other issue, of course, is that we need to, kind of look at it and start working. There's some questions about, well, I think the overall goal of this proposal is we want some magic text within a comment. One of the questions is what the magic text should be. I propose security underscore report colon ignore. It could be no lint. It could be some other things. We don't have to make that decision today. We eventually are going to have to make a decision, but step one before we try to make decisions is this a reasonable thing for this group to work on? So, does anybody agree? Does anyone oppose?
I think it is. I mean, I feel like if you look at the objective of this group, I'll paste that in the chat. It's scroll down a little ways on the GitHub page. There's objective, and I think improve is the bullet point I'm most interested in focusing on. And I think this clearly falls under the category of improve, where
Exactly.
this is a problem. And I think this is a lovely group to take it on.
Yeah. I will do a quick observation, if you don't mind, of why this as opposed to something else. Josh, if you can give me just a moment to make the pitch. There are some tools that eliminate false negatives other ways. In particular, I do a lot of fun and exciting things with Brakeman and well, Railroader too, where the suppression of false negatives is in a separate JSON file. If the code never changes, this is fine. As soon as anything changes, basically the suppression is by, hey, on this file, on this line. It just turns out to be terrible for long-term maintenance because anytime you make a change, suddenly all those suppressed false reports show up again. Having it as a simple inline comment works much better in terms of knowing what's been suppressed and handling editing of files. So, and it's what some other tools already do. So that's the basic pitch for not just this proposal, but the way the proposal is being made. And we can argue about what the special trigger text is. And that's fine. We'll have that argument, but have it once. Okay? Does anybody have, maybe the right way, Josh, if you is does anybody object to this as a project?
Yeah, I any complaints? I have a strong suspicion no one will object. I think, David, this falls under the way I want this group to run is if you want to do something, just go do it. And like you want to do this, go do it. And if people complain, like then don't help.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Fair enough. But I think the reason I want to actually get a general consensus and raise up to the TAC is not so much that we want to suppress work, because I agree. I think it's the much more coordination. In other words, in this particular case, I would be shocked if there was any problems, but somebody else may know something that we don't know about. It's possible, for example, although pretty sure this isn't true, some other working group is doing something similar. So I just think in terms of it's really a coordination so we don't step on each other's toes thing than a slowdown. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna claim in the notes here that there was general consensus on adding this as a working group item. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Add this project as a working group item. It may not be called a project. I guess doc things may in the future be called something else other than a project. Some people find that word confusing, but we'll find once we find out what the word is, we can change that. And somebody needs to tell the TAC. Josh, how about you tell the TAC? I hear you have some relationship with the TAC.
That's the rumor. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
Let me
so
write it to you.
Josh will email to TAC that we plan to add this as a project.
Yeah.
Just for coordination. I mean, I, if the TAC says no, don't do that, I'll eat my hat if I.
I don't think the TAC can say no. I mean, we're so just for the group to be aware of there is a lot of confusion in the space of the TAC, the Technical Advisory Council, on how projects and working groups are related and things like project donations work, and it's all kind of a mess right now, and it's being worked out. But fundamentally, the way it stands right now is basically working groups get to create projects, and there's basically nothing the TAC can do about it. Which I'm okay with. The intent is you don't want the TAC like controlling things, I guess, to use the term.
Well, you know what? If you read the charter, I think the TAC can be stronger, whether or not the TAC uses that power or not. But I think the goal isn't to stop any work.
Yeah,
The goal is to prevent duplication of work.
that's fair. That could be. It's whatever. No
Yeah.
one's gonna care.
Yeah, nobody's gonna fight
And,
this. Really,
and
really, it's
yeah,
I'm requesting do at least this little process jig, so that there's so that nobody's surprised, and hopefully we can get some people to help us.
yeah, totally. And now, kind of adding on to that, there's one of the things I want to see us do as a group is measuring. I feel like the improve aspect of our objectives, being able to measure and decide what's doing something well or not, is important. And so, like, I think a natural extension of this project, David, is
Mhm.
we want the ability to say, okay, this is how we think tools should note false positives, but then also build test cases and see which tools are doing this well or not well. And I think that's really, really important.
Okay, potential future. Although I think that's a completely different project. It's the whole
It is, and I'm
measuring of
getting to
tools.
that. So that is where, if we don't even put that down, David, because I think that's something I want to talk about next. So then, is everyone good with this? Do we want to talk about this particular item anymore before we move on? It feels simple. I mean, it's
It
an
does.
awesome idea.
I do have one request which we don't have to resolve today, which is, you know, does anyone have any druthers on what the magic comment text is? I think it's important that we agree on one. It's less important on what it is, unless it's something that could easily be misunderstood. You know, we don't want the word "the" to be the trigger.
Right, right.
But
I think, David, this is a good opportunity to reach out to some of the projects. Like, I
yep,
know you work with Flaw Finder, talk to the rats folks, I don't know if Brakeman is interested in something like that. You know what I mean, though? Like,
right.
just
Yeah,
see
I
who
don't know, but
cares.
right, right. Okay, so next steps, reach out to some tool makers to find out their preferences and or what they do.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's fair enough. I won't be able to do anything for let's see here. Um, 5 more days because I'm pressing on an April 17 deadline. But after that, I should be able to do some reach outs. But you know what? It shouldn't be just me. I suspect some other folks here have some connection to some static analyzers.
Yep.
Um, so I mean, David, I can talk to the rats folks. Um, I don't have that many connect. You know what?
You
For
you can
political
also
reasons,
talk
I
to the
probably
Flaw
should be.
Finder folks.
Yeah. Let's see. I'll see if I can talk to myself. Some people may already accuse me of that. Uh, I probably should not be the one talking to Brakeman if you wanted to talk to Brakeman. Um, what does anybody else have any connection to any other static analysis tools that they might be able to quickly talk to about their interest in this sort of thing?
My guess, David, is this isn't the right place to ask that question. I think
Okay.
it would be easier to take I think this is where I would like to, I don't have a plan right now and I don't want to start writing it down now, but having kind of an expected progression of creating some of these projects and tools. Like, obviously David has a lot of interest in it. There's going to be other people who have interest, but how do people log their interest, right?
Hmm.
Which maybe it's a file in GitHub. I don't know. But I have a suspicion if we mail the list and say, like, these are the things we need people to do. And I don't just mean, oh, does anyone have any connections? I mean, like, actual work items. Because one thing I found is in whenever you work with an open source project, there's always people who come to you and say, I want to help. And when you're like, oh, here's a list of all the issues that have ever been filed, pick one and fix it. Like that doesn't work, right? You need like good, easy, medium, and hard tasks, I think, generally for people to focus on. So
Josh, may I interrupt here?
please.
Allow me to introduce myself. So Paweł Pawlak, I'm working in ONAP, so I'm leading security subcommittee group there. And I just joined your meeting. It's my first time, so,
Awesome. Welcome.
nice to meet you guys. In fact, in ONAP, we are using the Sonar Cloud for the static analysis.
Okay. ONAP
So
uses
maybe
what?
Sonar Cloud.
Summer Cloud? I did.
Sonar
Oh,
Cloud.
Sonar Cube. Oh, you mean Sonar Cube?
Sonar Cube, but
There you go.
now it's Sonar Cube is transferred to Sonar Cloud, I guess.
Okay.
So yeah, we use it for the static analysis.
Okay.
So maybe I could help.
Okay. Do you have any contact with the folks at Sonar Cloud?
Well, I do have through Tony Hansen from AT&T. David, maybe you know him.
I'm very sorry. I'm having trouble understanding you. Repeat.
Sorry, maybe it's my English. So I do have through Tony Hansen from AT&T.
Okay.
Maybe you know him through
Okay.
CIA badging stuff. So it's sometimes difficult to get some info from them. We had recently some issues about the new API, and it was difficult to get the documentation. But okay, let's see. We can try.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this seems like the false positive something is pretty much almost every tool. You know, it's pretty unusual to have a tool that doesn't have false positives. If you know, a static analysis tool, I'm sure we can find one. I'm sure we can find one.
No,
but
no, you can't.
You can, but the false negative rates can be pretty horrific. So,
so you want to do some white labeling feature, or what exactly you want to achieve?
The goal is we want to get agreement across the tools of how to suppress a warning on the next line, so that if you use 5 different tools, we don't have to suppress it 5 different ways to get the tools to shut up about something that's not actually a problem.
Okay.
And that's it. You know, add a comment in a particular format that says, hey, that next line, it's okay. Please be quiet.
Okay, I gotcha.
So, okay, that's it.
Cool.
Yeah, we can check with the Sonar Cloud guys.
There we
if
go.
it's already implemented, or
yeah, if they implement it, how do they do that? And if not, would they be interested? That's it.
Okay.
It'll be interesting how many of the vendors are buy into this, because I know like this was always, it's really hard to change vendors when you use like their special magic. So well, I don't want to be all conspiracy theory, but we'll see. Cool. Okay.
And you know what? If we get serious research, we could, as an appendix, how people have done it in the past. Just so that people will know, oh, we did look at what was already done.
Yep. Absolutely. Great. I dig it. What about, how are you gonna create a GitHub repo for this, David? Is that your plan?
My current repo is to start with a Google Doc, edit, and then move it into GitHub. My experience has been that trying to initial docs are a lot easier to wiggle on Google Docs until you start getting things down. GitHub is really good for tracking things once things are a little more solid.
Okay. Can you also take an action item to submit a pull request to add this to the README in the security tooling? Because there's an active projects. We need to prune the list because some of this isn't very active, but we should.
Okay.
I will keep track of it there.
I will do that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right, cool. So the only other thing on the list then is there's a list of proposed ideas that were discussed in the last meeting. I went through the meeting notes and I pulled out some of the things that there was interest in. And I think this is where the concept of, oh, David, do you have a comment?
Yes,
you,
thanks.
David. Sorry.
I just wanted to make a comment with regards to the previous item.
Mhm.
Let me just lower the hand. No, it's not automatic. There are several articles out there, just based in one example in the chat, that have a kind of a counter argument for using comments to disable static analysis. I don't want to talk about that because I think it's actually a useful tool to be able to do that. But in one of the sections in this article in particular, there is a list of mechanisms that can be supplemental to that, such as non-disableable rules by default. And I was wondering whether it's a goal of this work David is looking into, or maybe this could be a goal of that tool or that capability to be able to define things that should not be disableable. Is that interesting at all?
Haven't really thought about that, but I mean, we certainly could. The problem with non-disableable warnings is that you then have to have absolute confidence that there's never ever a case where the tool is wrong. That is a very, very short list because it's not just, hey, can you analyze code, but does the tool completely and fully and unmistakably understand the exact environment and situation that the software being analyzed is being used in? The answer is generally no. So I'm not sure that non-disableable makes much sense. But hey, if it does, let's talk about that. Certainly worthy of discussion. I will say that Flaw Finder is one tool that does support false, positive suppression. And one of the options that Flaw Finder specifically supports is called ignoring ignores, which is the hardest thing I've ever found to document. Where normally it'll look at it'll ignore lines that are marked as ignore, but if you turn on the ignore option, it'll ignore the ignores. So I think it's valuable to at least have a way to ignore the suppressive comments as an option. But I think we should totally talk about that within this doc, and then we go from there.
In this article, the author makes the sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to label this as a sandbox draft. It's still and making it clear that it's draft when we put this in the active projects. Okay. But how's this? Why don't you just add that note somewhere in the last part of this spec, and we'll go from there.
Yep, I love it. And I'm a huge fan of having these discussions. And even if the discussion comes out with a negative result, essentially saying we don't care, it's still very valuable to note that, like, we discussed this thing and we came to no conclusion, or we decided not to do this, because it keeps coming up otherwise. Cool. All right. Well, thank you, David. Both Davids.
Okay. All right. And I'll just put a little note at the bottom of the existing doc. Obviously, we will need to work it, but at least now it's noted in there. Well, something to work on. Thank you.
Yep. Awesome. Is that link in there?
It will. Well, the link to the Google Doc will be there.
No, not the link to the Google Doc. This link in the chat. I don't know if you saw that. I'll just paste it in the doc quick.
Oh, disable comments. No, I did not see that.
I stuck it in there because I think not Google. I think Zoom chats vanish.
They do.
I don't know. Whatever.
All right. Yep. So I will correct. I will, for the moment, I'm going to make sure that's in the. Oh, there you go.
I did it.
And somebody else has already did it. Excellent. Thank you. Okay.
All right. So moving on, we've got the other item, which is the summary of the things the group wants to work on, which was, this came up. I went through the notes. I wrote down the things people are interested in. And so this is where I think I want to deviate from maybe what we'll say a traditional working group might look like, because I think a lot of working groups talk too much. And I'm very much of the opinion, if someone wants to do something, they should just go do it and find people who are interested in working on it. Like, for example, my primary interest in this group is to measure tools. That is what I want to do. It's something I have a lot of personal interest in, and it's something that I think is good for the industry. And I talked about this last time. And so like, how do I want to make this happen? I don't have time at the moment, so it'll be probably a week or two before I do anything. But like, in David Wheeler, this is where I think your input, just as the OpenSSF kind of representative, is valuable. Like, if someone wants to start doing something, what do we want them to do? Just create like a private repo and go to town and tell everyone? Do we want to create, like, I don't want to have a tools working group with 30 dead repos, right? That feels silly to me.
Right.
So I'm curious what our thoughts are for kind of next steps in that regard.
Well, I think we need to differentiate between dead and completed. I'm fully willing to believe that some specs, you write them, you're done, and then it's all, and then your main problem is making sure people know to use it where it makes sense, not just, is dead. If it's dead, then we should, I don't know if we should delete the repo, but we should at least clearly mark it as archived. So, okay, yeah, for dead, clearly mark the project as archived.
Which, I mean, GitHub lets us do that, but I'm saying
Absolutely.
kind of even before that point, like, let's say I decide I want to write a tool to measure things, and I create a repo and I add a README, and then I disappear. Like, what? You know what I mean? I mean,
Right. Well,
I don't want that situation where we have 30 repos with a README and maybe 6 lines of Python checked in, and like, that's not helpful, right?
right. I agree with you. So I think that I'm a believer in minimal process, but not no process.
Right.
So I think that the first step of that is, instead of just, hey, random creating a repo, you first show up in a discussion, mailing list, in some public fora, be it a meeting or a mailing list. Have that discussion. Hey, is this worth doing? Will somebody else support this? Or at least, do people think this is a reasonable idea? And then when they start doing stuff, now something that some working groups do is they do a quick, hey, our current active projects, what's the status? And that way we can quickly identify if there's nothing happening, and nothing ever happens. It quickly becomes obvious that it's either dead or or at best complete, but probably dead. And then we can archive it and move it off. But I think that there's another good reason to raise it up within the working group and really up to the TAC, which is we want to minimize the chance of it being dead by getting multiple people working it. So the more people we make aware of it, it's not a guarantee, obviously not, but it increases the odds of it being dead. And I think that's the real goal is, we want to get rid of dead, we want to clearly mark dead projects as dead projects, but even better, make them not dead. Hopefully alive, not just zombie.
Yeah. And I think another aspect of this I just wrote down in the notes is, is there already something happening similar to this? Like, because there's so many projects and there's so much work going on. No one person can keep track of it.
Yeah, keep track of what? Keep track
Like,
of what this working group does, or all things?
No, like, for example, I'm interested in, like, let's say I want to build something to measure how static analyzers ignore comments, right? Like, I think that's a natural progression from your project into what I want to do of the measuring and pushing the whole industry forward. Is there something that already does this, right? Is there somewhere we could go and work with another group instead of trying to build another thing, because goodness knows in open source, there's 700 versions of certain things and they all suck, instead of having, you know, 2 that are good.
Right. I guess although I wouldn't normally call it out, maybe we should. Whenever I do research, step 1 is always literature search. You know, what's already being done. You mentioned the look for duplicate efforts, you know, related efforts, etc. You know, doing a good, ask working group and do some web searches. Can find out a lot. And I
If I
think
may
that's
interject, hi, this is Arno. If I may interject, I mean, it's very common in places where we allow, you know, kind of interested people to just go ahead and start new work and just to see where it goes, to have some amount of requirements as to, you know, what's expected, and especially in terms of, you know, how many people are actually interested in working on something like this. Because if you really only have one person, you know, you can have doubts about the you know, how much momentum this is going to go to take and it will get, and how long is it going to last.
right.
And so,
Right.
you know, in Hyperledger, we have notion of labs where anybody can make a proposition to start a lab, but there is some rules about, you know, what is expected as a basic requirement for things to be accepted. And there are things like W3C as a community group concept, which, you know, they require at least 3 people to say, yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'd be interested in participating in this. So you might want to set some kind of, you know, threshold like this, basic requirements, before just saying, yeah, sure, start whatever you want.
I think that makes sense.
And you probably have to expect to do a little bit of, you know, house cleaning every now and then. I mean, we have that in Hyperledger where we still set the bar actually on purpose really low. And, you know, after 6 months or so, we have what we call lab stewards. They're people, I'm part of them, who are volunteering to keep an eye on what's going on in that space. And then if we spot, you know, repos that have not been active for several months, we just say, hey, we're going to archive it. And if somebody comes back and say, hey, I'm actually interested in picking that up, we can always resurrect it. But, you know, you have to expect to do a bit of that.
That makes sense. I like that.
And again, having that public discussion makes this a lot easier.
Yep, I agree. So on that actually reminds me of one other thing. So this group, and I don't think this is exactly the right place to answer the question, but we have a mailing list and there's a GitHub discussions page, and I detest having 2 places. Does anyone feel strongly? I would love to like murder the GitHub discussions and say, take it to the list.
Please murder.
Good. Okay. And I will bring
Kill it
this
with
to the
fire.
list. I'll send an email about this. I'll
Okay.
give myself a to-do.
I've been on every working group, almost every working group meeting, and I was unaware of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I agree with you. It's not that the GitHub ones are wrong necessarily, but I agree. You know, if there's too many places, then I won't see it. I already struggle with. I've got mailing lists. I've got Slack. I've got too many things to monitor, and that's another one I
Yeah.
don't. I didn't even wasn't aware it existed.
Yep. I hear you. All right. So, okay. So I like what we talked about for the project. So here's what I want to do then. I want to take what we've written up and turn it into a document with just some basic expectations. I hope and expect this group to create many projects in the future. And so I think what Arnaud said makes a lot of sense, of having some basic expectations just to lay the groundwork. I will write this up and mail the list, of course. Okay, cool. I don't know anything else. Does anyone have anything else? I'm also a huge fan of ending meetings early. So
So I have another comment which is kind of more general is, with regard to the group, and the reason I'm here today, to be fair, is, honest, is I wanted to know what this group thinks is going to be doing. And I think it needs to be said clearly what it does and what it doesn't do. And, initially when I came to OpenSSF, I was like, oh, okay, so there is a group that focuses on developing all the tools within OpenSSF. And that's not the case, because there are things like scorecard, criticality score that are not under this working group's purview. So I think, it'd be good to update the page to also list the things you don't do and maybe why. Or I don't know if you guys have a clear idea of how you draw the line between what you do and what you don't.
it's less clear than I would like, but so when I took over as the lead for this group, and I'm not looking to be the iron fist here by any means. I strongly believe that working groups are what the members make them to be, but I want to see this group push all of the security tooling in the open source space forward. And the way I described this in the last meeting was, we have a Yodems here from Brazilian, and when Log4j happened, Resilient put out if you look in the notes, the last one, there's a link to a Resilient blog post. So they basically they put together some tests of a bunch of Log4j scanners, and then they put out their findings. And for example, I work for a company called Anchor, and we have a tool called Gripe, which is Keith still here? Keith was here, who works on Gripe for us. But for example, our developers saw this blog post from Resilient, and we're like, we can check those boxes. And they did, right? And so I would love to see us do things like measure a bunch of tools. That's what I'm really interested in, is writing a test suite or finding someone already doing this and working with them, but kind of testing vulnerability scanners and SBOM scanners and static analyzers and all these tools, and saying, these are what the findings look like. And my intent isn't to say this one's the best. My intent is to give the industry kind of a baseline to say, this is what your tool does well, this is what your tool could do better. And then the tool developers have the ability to push themselves forward, right? And I think this would be a nice way to see the whole industry just keep nudging itself in the right direction.
Yeah, there's a risk in, I think, I don't know how far you can take this. I mean, you don't want to end up with some liability issues by, being seen as ranking tools or grading them, because people will be, entitled to complain and say, no, that's an unfair assessment of a tool. And I think there is it's a risky business.
I don't think it's risky at all. I think it's risky when you're not completely open. I think we are the OpenSSF. This is an open working group. It's going to be open source projects. And yeah, there's going to be people who complain about their tools and whatever. We don't intend to rank commercial tools. If they want to be ranked, that's great. But the intention is to put the focus on open source tooling and use this as a way to say, okay, open source tooling, here are the features you do well. Here's some things you could maybe work on, open issues and do the work. And if you don't like it, fix your damn tool. That's how this works. I think complaining and saying, oh, that's not fair, whatever, life isn't fair. Go fix your damn tools. But that all said, if you have a suggestion on where you think this group could go and benefit the open source universe, I'm all ears. I'm very much of the attitude, if you want to make something happen, make it happen. This is not going to be a group of, oh, we should go do this. Go do it, make it a thing. I think that's how we have progress.
Yeah, no, that part I agree with for sure.
I like George.
I think it's kind of like sorry, double.
We can hear you, Yodam. You can just, whatever, ignore the other one. Now we can't hear you.
Okay, now you can, right?
Yep,
I have
there.
two devices, one on mute. Yeah, I just need to go commute. I'm saying what I was going to say. It's kind of like what Mitra does. Like they just released their ranking. They focus on commercial tools, but it does like Josh said, pushes the industry forward. Like I know that I think it was Synopsys who didn't rank well in this year's test, and they put up a blog with basically it hurts them in a personal place that they want to improve. If we can do something that is like industry acceptable standard, even for open source project, not to involve any commercial tools, and maybe it will, the commercial tools will come and want to show how they hold against that benchmark.
Now, there are some benchmarks, and in fact, we have some within our working group for measuring static analysis tools.
In this working group,
Yes, hold up.
which tool is that?
Well, it's really a repo set, but
I know of the CVE.
right, the CVE benchmarking initiative is basically a big repo of test cases.
Yeah, and I hope to see us resurrect that in some meaningful way as
Right.
part of this.
Right. I mean, I would not call it complete. On the other hand, you don't really have to. I mean, you could just use it as it is. There's nothing that that prevents its use as is. The
I
big
think it's
problem.
broken, David. I tried to use it a couple months
Really?
ago and I couldn't make it work. There's some like weird dependency bustedness
Oh.
because I think it's all node, and goodness knows there's nothing NPM likes more than breaking everything.
Oh, how can you say such a thing? I'm sure no one's ever experienced that. Do they not lock their? I guess they don't lock their dependencies.
I honestly don't remember anymore. It's been too long, but I know I couldn't
Got
get it to work and I didn't care enough to try. So
Got
I
it.
gave up.
Okay.
But I think let's fix it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wish you awesome to if you could tell us what the problem was, and maybe we could find. But I agree. Let's if there's a problem using it, if there's a way to improve it, that's great. I will say that I worked a while back with Summate and the Juliet folks, developing test suites, and the big challenge we had were DeWitt clauses.
Yeah,
That's
but
not
that doesn't affect open source, right?
doesn't affect open source tools, no.
Right.
But it does affect a lot of the other tools.
And that's fine. And I think DeWitt clauses are a very real concern, but I also think now you'll understand this better than I will. If someone comes to us and sends us like a plugin or whatever to make their tooling work, I presume there's no concern of DeWitt, right? If they're the ones who
That's right.
submitted this, right? And that's the
right. No,
intent.
the DeWitt is involving the reporting of the results, not
Right.
adding the code to do the
Right.
analysis.
Right.
And in fact, the way some people get around DeWitt clauses is I'm a really big org and I'll redo the analysis myself, which is a crappy way to deal with it. But I can tell you it's what the U.S. government does. They'll analyze the tools and then they'll have reports, and you can't share them outside some very, very limited fora. And if you think that's terrible, don't worry, I agree with you. It doesn't help anybody else.
Right. And I think that, but again, like we're the OpenSSF, right? Our intent is to promote and I guess improve the open source ecosystem. And I think the tooling is a big part of that. And so I don't have a ton of interest in promoting or improving closed source software.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with developing open source tools that can help the closed source ones. But
Sure,
you're right. That's I mean, because of legal impediments, we may not be able to do certain things, and we will stick to what's legal.
Yep, I agree. And look, if they want to come play in our sandbox, that's great. And if they don't, that's great too. Like, it doesn't bother me either way. Like, I'm not going to say no closed source measuring because that would be foolish, but I'm also not going to seek it out for
Okay,
the very reason you described.
fair enough.
Because like, I don't think me or you or the OpenSSF or the Linux Foundation wants to get sued. So
No, we want to stay absolutely legal. Now, one of my personal hobby horses is I would love to see DeWitt clauses rendered not enforceable, but that
Wow.
is not the remit of this group. So, so if you
That
want,
could
if you
be-
want to, if you want to tilt that windmill with me, come talk to me separately.
that could be a new working group, right?
I think David, you've set a new record, 2 wonderful visual images for my brain to savor for the rest of the day. You on a hobby horse and you Greco-Roman wrestling. Sure.
And tilting at windmills. Okay, so all right, I will try to provide less imagery in the future today.
Awesome. Okay, so we're out of issues, and Arnaud, I truly want to thank you for your comments. I appreciate any input anyone has, whether I necessarily agree with it or not. I think it's valuable to discuss all aspects of everything we want to do. And I think what I would like to make sure we do is just, if anyone has ideas or suggestions or comments, like, take it to the list. I think the mailing list is going to be a far more effective communication method than this meeting is, because obviously this meeting has what, like 13 people in it? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 13 people. The mailing list has hundreds. So I'm never going to want to use this meeting to make, decisions or anything like that, just because it's not representative of the larger group. So cool. I have nothing else. Unless someone has something. Oh, Jory put in OpenSSF Day. Jory, do you want to quickly explain what that is?
Yes, super duper fast. OpenSSF Day will be on June 20th in Austin, Texas. It's what's called an add-on event to the Open Source Summit, which is also home to the Global Security Vulnerability Reporting and Supply Chain Security Tracks and Linux security. So lots of different security focused events happening in Texas, and they've given us some space ahead of the conference to host our own OpenSSF Day. I'm hoping to make sure that everyone in the working groups are aware that they're welcome to come a day early. We're looking for folks who might be interested in participating in like discussions and breakouts and conversations and stuff on those days as well. So if you plan to be there, let me know, and I can definitely make sure that you are kept in the loop for the activities that day and that week related to OpenSSF.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, and in our notes, I have made the do things on the mailing list in bold on our notes.
Awesome. Thank you, David. All right. If there's nothing else, everyone have a lovely rest of your day. And I thank you all for the lively discussion. It was fantastic.
Thank you.
Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank